Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan Ernest Pearce. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 22nd of June 2024. If you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out the screen at the moment, pause the video and look at the key. Right, this is a day where there's not a lot of movement on the front line, but actually where there is movement, it's really significant. No change to the northern front line, northeastern front line, Avdiivka, further down to the south of Donetsk, to the Zaporizhia front line, to Dnipro River Delta. Okay, so good news for the Ukrainians with regard to that. Just before we go on to look at in a little bit more detail, George Barros from the Institute for the Study of War has been saying more colour to Russia's sanctuary saga from ABC News this time. Since late May, Ukraine has been able to target Russian troops and air defence systems 20 kilometres, so that's 12 miles from the border in the Kharkiv region. If true, 20 kilometres is absolutely disappointing. And if that is indeed, I mean, I don't know of the detail of some of the strikes that we have seen inside Belgorod, but if they only reach to 20 kilometres, then that is truly disappointing given the 84-kilometre reach of the HIMARS missiles. Let's see, so that's 23.49 kilometres, so 20 kilometres barely gets you to Belgorod city itself. Indeed, you know, one would presume that this is the where that's 20, so it doesn't even get you to Belgorod from the border, pretty much. That is indeed really disappointing. I don't know if that's true. The thought was they could use sort of 84-kilometre ammunition, rockets, missiles, but that would give them a pretty good reach there, and they could hit a lot of the staging points and useful targets inside Belgorod Oblast, but just a 20-kilometre reach gets you nothing. And of course, if you don't include the air bases there, that just allows the Russians to take off with their planes, fire their aviation, you know, their CARB, FAB 500s, or now up to 3,000 at Kharkiv general direction, and there's not a lot you can do about it. Try to shoot down those planes as they fly, 70 kilometers back behind or maybe 50 kilometers behind the border. It's just really challenging for Ukraine to be able to deal with that. And it's a real disappointment. The report suggests, says Barros, that the Biden administration's determination of whether Russian forces are attempting to attack Ukraine depends on whether the Russian forces are within 20 kilometers of the international border. Really, really annoying. If that's the case, now, don't know that is the case. There are so many claims and counterclaims regarding this, but they need to be given a much greater, freer reign, the Ukrainians, to hit targets within Belgorod, especially as we just heard, another residential building has had a guided glide bomb slam into it in Kharkiv, causing death and injury. Right, we are going to come down, as I say, no change to these. In fact, one more thing to say about up in Vovchansk area. So the Russians are withdrawing some units from near Vovchansk due to loss of combat capability, says Getty here. This was stated by the spokesman for the Khortytsia operational and strategic group of troops near Nazar Voloshin. The withdrawal is recorded near Lipki, as it says here, and Tiki. Russians did not conduct active hostilities in this area yesterday and this morning. Okay, let's have a look at those areas. So that's likely to be Lipsi area around here, but it might not be. You get different spelling of these places. And then you've got the area of Tika there, or Tiki. That's likely where they're talking about, but could be other places. But the idea is that the Russians are withdrawing troops from here. That is, I think, implicit acceptance that it has failed, but they have also, as the Ukrainians have taken their eye off the ball, had some success further down the front line, and we're going to go to there now. So we'll scoot on past most of the front line until we get down. We'll pop into Chaziv Yard just for a second, around Klishchivka, actually, not Chaziv Yard. So no change to Chaziv Yard itself, very significant. A little claim about Klishchivka is that Ukrainian soldiers of the 42nd Brigade and 57th Brigade stormed the Russian position in Klishchivka, Donetsk region. There's a 7-minute video of all sorts of stuff going on there that you can check out. So the Russians being pressured a little bit in the Klishivka area, which means that's still a fairly active part of the front line, even though there's been no real change there for an awful long time. Now we're going to come down to an area between Bakhmut and Avdiivka, and this is the kind of Toretsk, New York, Sumy area. Okay, Toretsk is this larger town that does get hit quite regularly. This has been on a very stable area of the front line, stable since 2014 pretty much. There's been no movement here, so it's not somewhere you would have been expecting the Russians to attack. There are some claims that the Ukrainians took some troops away from here, and that's why the Russians decided to attack. There are claims I've just seen of the person in charge of the Eastern Front, Eastern group of forces for the Ukrainians, has just been getting a bit of an R&R down in Odessa, drinking in Odessa, and the Russians have attacked. So that's really bad PR for the Ukrainians, if that is indeed the case. Either way, the Russians have made some significant gains here, and by significant I mean, this is an area that hasn't been threatened at all, and Sumy is a town that is, or a small village area on the outskirts really of Pivnichne and Toretsk, that's been sitting there happily, not having anything happen there for an awful long time. We did have these tailings heaps, these big mining areas that were active a couple of months ago. If you remember, the Russians were pushed back. Ukrainians took control of these very tall. I mean, this is an actual one-to-one rendering of what the lay of the land is there, and the Ukrainians did randomly, opportunistically attack there, take some ground, and then the Russians eventually pushed them back and kind of back to where they started, give or take. But generally around here, not a lot of movement. Mayorsk here is a railway junction where we saw the Russians advance recently, and then they've added to that both mappers, well, I say both, Andrew Perpetua and Deep State maps here, showing that the Russians have pretty much taken control of Sumy to some considerable degree. I mean, Deep State maps has them controlling all of it. Andrew Perpetua not so much at the moment. This is, I think, quite worrying. The Russians having success there. Not that one here. So Ukrainian military reports increased Russian offensive near Toretsk, Donetsk Oblast. A Ukrainian military spokesman Nazar Voloshin confirms ongoing battles. The Deep State Monitoring Service claims that Russian forces captured Sumy, a village near Toretsk, says the Euromaidan Press. Max 24 confirms this. The Russians managed to capture the village of Sumy, according to Deep State. Russian troops have advanced in the northern region. The goal is to capture Toretsk. So that is actually quite some significant gains for the Russians here. First into Mayorsk and then into several of these areas at the same time. Real challenge. Don't know what the details of this situation are really, just hearing a lot of rumours. But certainly annoying for it's a bit of an understatement, for the Ukrainians, as not only do they cede land, but this is yet another point where the Russians are attacking on a front line. It's almost like their deep battle tactics of attack everywhere, see which is able to be exploited. If there's a weakness somewhere, and pile into that weakness. Well, here potentially was a weakness in terms of Ukrainians maybe removing some of their troops in that area to help maybe up in Kharkiv or some other reason, maybe some kind of rotation, and the Russians capitalizing on that and taking some significant land there. So definitely want to watch out for going forward what the Ukrainians do in terms of plugging that gap and stopping the forward momentum of the Russians. We'll see, I guess. Right. Andrew Perpetua also has some very small gains for the Russians up in the north of the Avdiivka salient between Novoalexandriivka and Arkhangelska there. And that is that. That's that for the whole of the front line, which is mainly this area to concern ourselves with. Another problem for the Ukrainians. Just when you think they are getting things a little bit settled, we don't see huge gains for the Russians. There is a game like that. But then, on the other hand, you could say, well, in the grand scheme of things, considering they're supposed to be on this major summer offensive, if that's the height of their offensive, then okay, it's not great, but it's not exactly what some had been worrying about. It just depends whether they do really have 10,000 people ready to go up along to Borova. I wouldn't even remotely think that's enough to succeed in doing that. What they're doing with their 50,000 up in Kharkiv, okay, it looks like they're withdrawing some of them, and so on and so forth. Different places. You can possibly imagine that the Russians might pile in a little bit more, continue with these these attacks that have some forward momentum, the Krasnohorivka and Avdiivka areas, Mariinka possibly, but as far as a major offensive, I still don't think the Russians have that within their grasp. I don't think they're capable of that. Anyway, let me know what you think. Really appreciate your support. Thank you for watching. Take care. Speak to you soon.